regards to this, saying if you do not put more measures in place to catch counterfeit bills, we will prosecute you into the ground and you'll have to close your business. They're making some major
And that was
threats.
and that was pretty much the center of this, right? The whole concept of addressing the counterfeit money.
Yeah, I believe that's, a major reason why, those cameras were put there. And
No,
and
I'm talking about why the police were called to, address George Floyd. It had to do, at least from what I understood, I didn't hear the full report, but it had to do with, a counterfeit bill or counterfeit money being involved or something to that effect.
right. So
Is that correct?
what the trial has shown us so far is that George Floyd came with a friend, male friend, into the store. The male friend tried to purchase something, and the cashier, I think, who was around 19 years old, real young like that, he said, "This is a counterfeit bill," and they tore it up and didn't allow the guy to purchase anything. And George Floyd afterwards purchased something. Maybe the cashier thought, who has the audacity to like use a counterfeit bill right after somebody else did? My guess is neither of these guys knew they had counterfeit bills. And so, anyways, George Floyd goes to buy something, and the student, the young man takes it, and he later realizes, wait, this is counterfeit. After George Floyd had walked out of the store, and so he told his boss, I'm not sure who it was, if it was Mahmoud or somebody else, told one of the manager of Cup Foods there, hey, this is counterfeit. What should I do? And he said, go out and go talk to him, talk to George Floyd. So he went out there, talked to the manager, wanted to get him to come back inside the store and, kind of say, hey, give me back what you buy. I'll give you back the counterfeit bill. Khalas, we'll be done with it. This don't have to go nowhere. And so the employee cashier went out and did that, tried to plead with them. They refused to come into the store. They were waiting for someone to come pick them up. So like George Floyd's friend, another associate that was in the car, a woman, those two people were waiting to be picked up. So George Floyd's just sitting in, I believe it was like kind of like a van, just sitting in there waiting for the other car to come pick the other people up. So he's like, I don't want to come into the store. Like these people are getting picked up. Like I need to be here. That's kind of the impression that I got from the trial. And so he went back, told his boss, like, they're not coming in. The boss said, please try again. Please try again to get them to come into the store. He's the manager's really not trying to make a big deal out of this, really not trying to get George Floyd in trouble. That's what it seemed like. So they went out again and pleaded, with George Floyd and his friends to come back into the store to talk about this. And again, they said no. So at that point, I guess, is when the police were called. Okay. And I felt the impression that I've gotten from all of this is that they had their hands tied. If they weren't going to call the police, the FBI was going to come down on them. There's cameras all around the building. FBI is always there snooping around. And lo and behold, we know from the trial now that every single witness that's been on the stand was interviewed by the FBI like the next day. All right. Because they had already been watching this place. They already like kind of knew the dynamics of this place.
Yeah, I think that it just speaks to the problems that we have in these urban centers. That it speaks to the problems that we have in these urban centers when it comes to the issue of employment and relationships and race dynamics and the issues of class and everything that comes along with that. And I don't think that this is going to get any easier because
Yeah.
you seen a similar situation in the DC area in terms of tensions between people, with the Uber driver and the young teenagers that try to do the carjacking. It's like everybody's trying to really figure out how do you survive in an economy in which there's pay stagnation or salary stagnation and the lifestyle is becoming more and more materialistic and demanding and intense and so on and so forth. That's kind of, I think, like some sort of cold reserve analysis that it's without going into a lot of details, that people are trying to figure out what's the next move. What's the next move? It's very indicative of where our society is at, whether it's the guys on the corner of the block, or whether it's law enforcement, or whether it's the store owners, or whether it's the customers. It's like we're caught in this almost nasty set of relationships that doesn't allow for much room for for nuance and understanding, or even justice or whatever. It's right now, the way that things are operating, the way that they're operating, is like there's not a lot of room for thinking about what's in the interests of the society and the community. It's more so, how can we just maintain the system as it is,
Yep.
and how can we make sure that people conform and align to the system as it is, but we're not thinking of a better set of arrangements that would make it a less confrontational, a less volatile society. We're in a volatile situation. It's very volatile.
Yeah.
I think we've never probably in recent times been at this level of mistrust of government. And it's not necessarily a situation which you can say that is conspiratorial. It's just the encounters are not all that great.
Yeah. It used to be like a right-wing thing, to be real suspicious of the government, but now I feel like it's just across the political spectrum.
Yeah, we're alienated from political leadership.
Mm-hmm.
You understand what I'm saying? We're alienated from political leaders. The different ethnic groups are at loggerheads, and then the whole concept of class. When you start talking about the lumpen proletariat and the bourgeoisie, or however you want to frame that, whatever sort of analysis, whether it's conflict, or whether it's functional, whatever analysis you want to use, it's just not a good position that we're in this country. And that's why we're saying these narratives, even for a moment myself, I had to separate between the Holy Land incident and the cup food incident, because the way that the media works, and it's not necessarily even a blame on the media, it's the lifestyle,
mm-hmm.
is that everything just merges together. And if your system of analysis is not nuanced, it's easy to start to analyze and go in the wrong direction.
As a local too, when I look at Holy Land, it's like it's far away from Cup Foods. It's a totally different neighborhood with a totally different history, vastly different demographics. Like, it couldn't be just two separate worlds to me. And I don't know if people outside of here recognize that.
No, because that nuance is not there. It's like you have the three-dimensional insight, and people have the one-dimensional insight. They can't see all of that nuance. We can't see all of that nuance. Even the reality of Cup Foods as a masjid, even all of the situations that you described, the community outreach and the problems with illegal transactions, being something that got the attention of law enforcement. All of that stuff is not really, all of those details are not there for people to have an understanding. That all those details give a whole different insight.
I feel like it does. People try to reduce it to like class, but really, the owners
class and race, class and race.
Yeah. The owners of Cup Foods are not wealthy people at all. Like, I don't really understand why people try to make it about class. Sure, they might have some, privilege for being Arab in comparison to, their Black employees and customers and things like that. But they've always been people who strove, to help the community and strove to help the weakest members of the community, strove to fight against racism and discrimination of all different shapes and forms. That doesn't mean that they're perfect. That doesn't mean that they can't introspect, be criticized, and change. but they seem to me to be very open to all of that. You know, even after the incident, you know, occurred, after George Floyd was murdered, you know, they did a lot to, you know, try to help the community. They were feeding the community. They were, you know, giving out like free pizza, free water. I took pictures of that myself. Like, they offered to pay for George Floyd's funeral. You know, there's a lot of things that they were trying to do as much as they could to help the community, and they were like that before this occurred too. This isn't like
Yeah,
a
that
new
becomes
type
the
of
question.
behavior.
Was it just it? That becomes the question. Was it just like a PR move, or
Right.
was that an authentic position? Because see, again that brings up the whole discussion on what relationship should Muslims have to the society on justice issues, even on the issue of you know, the how do we relate to the community, you know, overall. That, you know, these communities that we're living in, that we're, you know, taking from, you know, what is our relationship to these communities, and what is our relationship also in this hell of a situation that we're in between different ethnicities, and, you know, in terms of dealing with sometimes legislation that is biased in one direction. Like, really, if Islam and the Muslims are not adding value to the society outside of creating another business and a so-called law-abiding citizen, but like, what are we actually contributing to? Like, what is our obligation to society, to the community? Because we definitely, we have our own issues. You know, we
Mhm.
have our own moral failings. We have our own encounters with the law. We have our own issues. But the reality is, at least as a framework, so that we're not just caught up in a pool of relativity or nihilism. The question is, what's our compass? You know, what is Islam saying to us about our relationship to the communities that we're in and to the society that we're in? Because we definitely, like I said, we're in the situation now where it's very volatile. People have
Right.
their own interpretations of what ethics are, you know, and they have their own understandings of what our relationships should be to one another. But the Muslim voice is something that's often not really heard, or we're imitating what others are saying.
Right. There's a lot of just kind of falling into like, you know, American, you know, political rhetoric, and not really kind of trying to think for ourselves from our own indigenous epistemologies. You know, we're not thinking from the perspective of Islamic ethics, you know, from the Shari'i perspective or the Ihsani perspective, or, you know, any of those types of things. Um, and, you know, that's unfortunate. When, you know, when I think about this, and I'm just a white man who, you know, doesn't really live or experience the things that Black residents experience when they have these Arab neighborhoods or Arab stores in their neighborhoods. But, you know, the thing that I think I would like to see them do that might be helpful is, you know, just like politicians every now and then do like a town hall. Maybe they should open up their store to have like a community event once a month where community members can come and talk about these things, you know, express their grievances or talk about the store and its role in the neighborhood, and how the store can help the community, and how the community and the store can work together.
I actually have to commend Iman in that regard. You know, maybe they don't do what, as you know, as much as we would like,
They've definitely been a
but
facilitator of that.
that dialogue has been, you know, that dialogue has been interjected into that environment on the south side of Chicago. I think there's no easy balance in all of that, to be honest with you. How you deal with the local, even local politicians, because that has its own dimensions that ties us
Yeah.
into a whole nother reality. But then, you know, at least at minimum of how you deal with the people is a good starting point. You know what I'm saying? What would you say is aside from the issue getting community input, what is the role of Muslims in this regard into these environments, especially toward the poor, regardless of who they are, toward the poor, regardless of religious background and ethnicity and all that type of stuff? Like, what is our, you know, responsibility in that?
In my opinion, when you look at the Sahaba and how the Sahaba interacted with the poor, And you look at the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The Prophet Muhammad, he always, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, always went to sleep without a single, dinar in his pocket. Every day, whatever, I guess you might say extra money, he tried to give to somebody or help somebody with it, or help the ummah, help the Muslim state, or, whatever. With the Sahaba in particular, you read their biographies in the biographical dictionaries, or, read things about them in Sirah and whatnot. So many of them were known in their spare time, spare money, to help the poor and needy. Like they didn't have no hobby like, we have today where, oh, we have some free time, we might as well do some, leisure hobby. No, they were out there feeding people, giving people clothes, giving people straight up money without asking, everything, details about their life or knowing what's going on. They're just giving them money, right, to help them, right? Having husnul dhan, a good opinion, a good assumption about these people. Even if they were people who drank alcohol, they were there and helping them. They weren't sitting there trying to, chastise these people, just judging or whatever, right? They came there and they were helping. And you have the whole Ahl Sufa, contingent of the Sahaba, who were the poor of the Sahaba, and they were well taken care of by the other Sahaba, right? And you had this brotherhood that was the Prophet intentionally made, peace be upon him, between the Muhajirin and the Ansar. And so when they did have, economic hardships, they would help one another. They stayed in each other's houses because some of them didn't have houses to stay in. You got to remember, they all made hijrah from Mecca to Medina, and they didn't have no house waiting for them in Medina. They had to stay with the Ansar. To me, that's really what informs my Islamic ethics on all this. Not to
mention, that's
a
tall. It's a tall call for people, but I think that that level of commitment. But I think that that's where mutual aid is going in today's time, anyway. I think mutual aid work is pushing in that direction. It really, some people look at it as a communist idea or this, that, the solidarity movements. Isn't Catholic social teaching. The reality at the end of the day is that, our neighborhoods were like that. I remember, I'm old enough to remember my neighborhood in Philadelphia, which was multicultural. It was like that. You had the old ladies that would look out. Matter of fact, there were two older European ladies, European American ladies, they used to get me in trouble all the time because I'm telling your mom when she comes home, what you were doing.
It's the community watch.
That's how it was. It was like, and when I think about it and I look back, we didn't have police, even though we lived in a more nice area of Philadelphia at that time, but we didn't have regular police coming through our community because our community, this was right before the age of the influx of drugs and all of that into the neighborhoods in many urban environments. But our neighborhood, in many ways, it had its own problems, but the community members policed it. The community members were the ones that knew if somebody that shouldn't be in your backyard was in your backyard, or they knew if that youth was bringing bad friends in, they knew who those youth were. The block watch, it was a different type of, sense of responsibility towards each other. And there were ethnic tensions, but it was like it was just a different reality. Now the breakdown is such that we're only talking about mending the community with some sort of policy reform that's not directly related to what the community needs, or it has nothing to do with empowering the community itself for it to address its issues. It's like what you were saying about the national activists, people that come in from the outside that have a certain type of platform that never ask the locals what is it, that they need, or, never engage the locals. And that's how I feel that a lot of this stuff, even in terms of policy, in terms of money, in terms of community organizing overall, a lot of this stuff has basically marginalized and sidelined the people themselves, the average people. But neighborhoods, like what you were describing, I think the concept of neighborhoods is something which is missing in most places in the U.S. Most
I
places.
mean, majority of gangs started that way as like a community watch, right? Organized group of people to serve the community, and some of them evolved into doing other things. But that it's that same kind of mentality, and that's one of the things that I had admired quite a lot about the community on Chicago and 38th there throughout this whole movement, I guess you would call it. Like, the community came together and they organized. All the homeowners around that area came together. People were bringing all kinds of food, a non-perishable food, and even perishable stuff, like fruits and vegetables, to the George Floyd Memorial. There was people there cooking every day, grilling food and giving it away for free. All right. The
Yeah, you're
community
talking
came
about you're
together.
talking about in the Twin Cities, right?
And I'm talking about the George Floyd Memorial area.
Yeah, because
You
some
know,
people were confused that when you mentioned Chicago.
yeah, Chicago Avenue is a street that George Floyd was murdered on by Derek Chauvin. And that's the street that I used to live on. And it's a street that goes north and south in Minneapolis, and you go a little bit north of there, you get Lake Street, where you got the famous Somali Mall, Supa Carmel, and it's like an immigrant area there in Lake Street that's not far away, where you have the big chunk of its Latino community, big chunk of its Somali community, but always the immigrants coming into Minneapolis usually started in that area. And just south of there a little bit, you get to 38th, and that's where Cup Foods is. So it's maybe like, mile and a half away from Lake Street. And Lake Street became a big center of the protest. Lake Street, half of it got burned down, in all the protests. The Lake Street is where the biggest confrontations with the police and the military were. You got to remember, Governor Walz in Minnesota, he sicked the military on us, the reserves. We weren't just
Yeah,
dealing
I
with
don't think I
police.
don't think a lot of people outside of Minnesota understand what took place.
Like, seriously, the military was there with their guns, tanks, well, not tanks, but like the, what do you call it, armored personnel carriers, right? Like, this stuff was real. This is stuff you see, it's going to be burned in your brain for the rest of your life. It's traumatic. you know there's a lot of people got injuries from the tear gas, the rubber bullets, all that stuff. But the neighborhood around 38th in Chicago came together in big ways. They organized, they brought barriers and constructed concrete barriers so that the police could not come into the area. They organized their own security, which I volunteered for sometimes. They had people on bikes who were in plain clothes that were riding in the neighborhood around there outside of the barriers to watch for any undercover cops coming in. People monitored closely who came in and out because they're always suspicious. Undercover cops or FBI or something were going to come in there, or white supremacists, or, and like I said, we did deal with a white supremacist like Hummer style SUV that tried to drive up an alleyway up into that area and run people over. You know, I mean, they came together, they had food, they had brought people blankets, people who, in the nighttime past curfew, you had to stay in this zone. You couldn't leave this zone. As soon as you walked out of there, the police jumped on you and would arrest you, like, immediately, like they were out there watching, right? But they knew they couldn't come into this zone because how the community came together and organized. Because of that, at nighttime, past curfew, all the homeless people came down there. Where else are they going to go? You got a curfew in effect. You got the military. You got the police they'll just arrest you on the spot. Bam, they're going to put them plastic things right on you. Zip ties. These homeless people, they all had to come down to the George Floyd Memorial and sleep. We fed them. We clothed them. We took care of them. We protected them. That's what it was like. You have people who were Antifa who were doing the security and biking around, just trying to protect and serve. They're the real people protecting and serving, you know? We had a medic bus, a bus with trained professionals who were medics and treating people for free. They were giving out bottles of water for free to anybody who was thirsty. You know, that's what the environment was like there. And there were people who they came every single day. Because, you know, you got to remember people, a lot of these people were out of work because of the pandemic. There are people from suburbs, St. Louis Park, different suburbs around the Twin Cities who were driving in every day, bringing their lawn chairs, come in there and sit. And some of them were elderly. You know, we're talking 80 years old, and they show up like every day. You know, they built their own food shelf at the memorial. You come donate food and you come get food. No questions asked. No matter who you are, you come get food. The community really came together. And I think that level of organization we need to learn from, and we need to continue even after all this is over. Like, hey, this is possible. This isn't just something you can think in your head. We can actually do this, and ain't nobody can stop us. You know what I mean?
Do what specifically?
We can come together and we can, you know, take care of our own neighborhoods. We can feed one another. We can clothe one another. We can protect one another. It's really not that hard. It's just, are you going to go out and actually do it or not? Are you going to give up your time? Are you going to give up your leisure, your luxury, whatever luxury you might have in life? You know, are you going to work and break your back to help other people?